David Menzies for the Rebel.media here in New York City. Well, I'm standing outside the Women's National Republican Club, and this is the venue tonight for a keynote speech by free speech activist Pamela Geller. But not everybody's happy with that. You see, the people who run CAIR, that's the Council on American-Islamic Relations, they've been trying to shut down this event. And you know, folks, they scored a partial victory earlier this month. CAIR actually got Eventbrite, that's the ticket buying service, to blacklist the event, so they couldn't sell tickets for it any longer. In any event, there's also a rumor that those sympathetic to CAIR are going to be staging a protest against Ms. Geller. And as you can see behind me, there is a police presence happening, and they're putting up some barricades. Haven't seen any protesters yet, but in the meantime, I'm going to go into the club and see what Ms. Geller has to say. And if those protesters do indeed materialize, I'll see what they have to say. Hey, ain't free speech wonderful? Well, I'm with the woman of the hour herself, Pamela Geller, free speech fighter, and she's about to give a talk very shortly here at the club. And Pamela, strange days we're living in. We have the Council on American-Islamic Relations actually trying to shut down an event happening in New York City, the land of the free and the home of the brave, where we're supposed to be practicing our First Amendment rights, and they were partially successful. They got Eventbrite to blacklist this event. What do you make of all this?
It's interesting to me because Eventbrite is still hosting events by jihad terrorist supporters, by unindicted co-conspirator speakers from CAIR, but this speaks to the left's war on our freedoms. They seek to replace the rights of man with rights of the mob. And this is why these events are so important, and this is why we must stand up now, because freedom of speech is essential to the freedom of any society. Without it, a tyrant can rule unopposed. So it is an absurd world that we're living in. It's a world with amnesia, where we've forgotten the lessons of literally centuries of intellectual wrestling, where we got to this point of freedom of speech and freedom of conscience and equality for all before the law. And we must fight back, and now is the time. We must fight back, David.
And Pamela, you have been fighting back, and there was a price on fighting back. 4 years ago, I was with you in Garland, Texas. We know what happened. A couple of heavily armed jihadis were en route to potentially take you out, and if not for a courageous member of law enforcement, might have got the opportunity to do so. This must be very scary some days, just getting up out of bed in the morning being Pamela Geller.
Well, it's surreal because, first of all, as you know, that was not the first assassination attempt, nor the last. There was a beheading plot in Boston, and one of the assailants was actually killed en route to New York when he attacked a Boston police officer. He was on his way to behead me. And yet, I am the one who's accused of being a racist, Islamophobic, anti-Muslim bigot, strictly because I oppose jihad terror and the Sharia. Clearly, it's not a question of opposing Muslims. I don't care if you worship a stone, just don't stone me with it. And this is what we're seeing. It's an upside-down world where there's a war on reality, there's a war on the intellect, and we are living this sort of age of amnesia. And I think it's very scary because what you're seeing is the compliance to the Sharia. Do not criticize the Quran, do not criticize Islam, do not criticize Muhammad. And if you cannot criticize a particular ideology, you cannot criticize a group, that group will rule over you.
And Pamela, going back to Eventbrite, cowardly blacklisting this event, in my opinion, you mentioned that they have no problem supplying their services for events that really do promote hatred. Why the double standard?
Because the left is aligned with the jihad force. I mean, we see this time and time again. We see it on the universities, we see it in the media, with the exception of the great rebel media, of course, but generally, I mean, this is an alliance. This is a leftist Islamic alliance because they share the same goal. What is that goal? That goal is control. control of the people. It's collectivism versus what we believe in, which is the individualism.
Pamela, that's the other thing. I mean, I find the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights two of the most beautiful documents ever penned. First and foremost, being the First Amendment, of course. And yet I worry that there is maybe a generation in America that isn't all that supportive of the First Amendment and might like to see it curtailed if your freedom of speech, God forbids, hurts feelings.
Yes, of course. And it's true, this generation of millennials has been brainwashed by a leftist indoctrination in the public schools, which is why this event, the New York Young Republicans Club, is so critical. Because you know what, David? Freedom is a young person's movement. I'm not doing this for me. I was free. I lived a free life. I had a free youth. I know what I'm fighting for. I know what we're losing. And it's very important that we educate this generation. I have more hope for the Gen Zs. I see a much more conservative movement in the Gen Zs, but I'm not willing to write off the millennials. We have to take back the public school. We have to take back the universities. And it's not just, these are just...
Is that possible, Pamela?
We need thought leaders. We need philosophers. We need to stop teaching Kant in the school and start teaching Ayn Rand in the school and Frederick Basquiat in the school. I mean, these are things that must be done, and we must stop signing off on taxpayer dollars that are funding our own destruction. And I see President Trump taking a stand in this. He cannot do it alone. He needs an army.
Now, there's a rumor that there's going to be some protesters coming. I see a huge police presence, and I see barricades going up. I don't know if it'll materialize or not as we get near to your speaking time. Is this a concern of yours too? I guess what I'm leading up to is that you are clearly exercising your First Amendment rights, but what is motivating Pamela Geller given this odious blowback of those on the left and those who indeed want to hurt or even kill you?
What is motivating me, David, is I am right and my cause is righteous. And the Council of American-Islamic Relations will be out there with four or six people, but there will be 4,000 or 6,000 journalists to cover it, because it's all about optics. When I had 30,000 people at Ground Zero, the media barely covered it. It's all about framing a narrative, and that's why what we're doing is so important, and that's why our protections on social media are so important, and why we must take legislative action to ensure our First Amendment rights in the public square, which is now social media. And we must fight, because this is the most precious gift of all, David. Freedom is the most precious gift of all. And of course, there are always people braying for blood. There are always people that want to take our freedoms away. You don't acquiesce. You do not give in.
Well, par for the course, Pamela Geller hit it out of the ballpark yet again in terms of giving a speech defending freedom of speech in front of a packed house. And on the flip side, those censorious thugs who comprise the rank and file of CAIR, despite much bluster online, they never did show up to cause disruption and ruin this event. So it's kind of ironic in a way, isn't it, folks, that the members of CAIR didn't exercise their First Amendment rights to shut down the First Amendment rights of others. For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Hey folks, if you like that video, press like and subscribe and never miss another Rebel video.